everyone, and welcome back to Lawfully Told, the podcast where we explore the law, the real stories, and real experiences. I'm your host, Sharanya Ranganatha, and today I'm really excited to be joined by someone whose career spans in law, technology, and major corporate deals. Our guest today is Geoffrey, an experienced technology transactions attorney who has worked both at top law firms and inside major companies. Before we dive into his journey and advice, let's start by getting to know him a little better. I think it would be helpful for our listeners to hear from you directly. So, to start us off, can you introduce yourself and tell us what you do and where you went to college and law school and a little bit about your professional background?
Thank you. Yes, happy to do so, and thank you for having me. My name is Geoffrey Brow. I actually have a sort of, I think what most people would characterize as a little bit of a unusual background. My father is British, my mother is American, and both cultural anthropologists who specialized in South Asia, Sri Lanka in particular. I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My father was teaching at Swarthmore College, a Quaker school outside of Philadelphia when I was born. I have an older sister. Her name is Ranjani, obviously a Sri Lankan name, not an American or a British name. I then spent my sort of formative years, or my high school, junior high, high school years here in Austin, Texas, because my father became professor of anthropology here at University of Texas and was professor here for many, many years. Um, I again had a little bit of a different background because I'm half British. I went to undergraduate at the London School of Economics, and then decided when I was an undergraduate that I was going to want to focus on that I wanted to be a lawyer. And I returned to the United States for law school. I went to Cornell Law School in Ithaca, New York. I began my career, as many lawyers do, in the corporate legal world, Wall Street, essentially in New York City, doing mergers and acquisitions, IPOs, financing transactions, that sort of thing. And I did that for about 7 or 8 years, both in New York and in London, two of the global financial capitals, of course. And then I decided I wanted to focus on technology because of the clients I had, I had the most interest in the industry of my technology clients. And I took my first in-house job at Dell Computer, which sort of ironically brought me back to Austin, Texas, which I had not lived in since was in high school. And I began my career as a technology transaction attorney there. Um, since that time, worked at a number of technology companies, ranging from the very large Dell, Google, AT&T, to startups, most notably a company that worked on revolutionary transportation technology called Virgin Hyperloop in Los Angeles, California. Have also worked at law firms doing technology transactions, and currently I'm assistant general counsel at Roku, which is sort of co-headed in both Austin and San Jose. A lot of our senior management are here in Austin, but historically, a lot of our corporate workforce is in San Jose, California.
That's such a diverse background. To see you go from your parents from like Sri Lanka to Pittsburgh to Austin, I'm sure you've had many experiences in all three of those very different capitals. And I'm glad to dive into that through the podcast. But so now we know about more of who you are. Let's rewind a bit and talk about how it all began. Many students wonder what first leads them to choose a career in law. So, looking back to the beginning, what originally drew you to law?
Great question. When I got my undergraduate degree at the London School of Economics, Um, One of the core courses as an IR major you have to take is public international law. And at that time, it was taught by this marvelous professor named Rosalind Higgins, who went on to be the UK's representative at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. I had not seriously considered law as I honestly I thought I was probably going to become a diplomat or something, good to take the foreign service exam or what have you. But I really enjoyed learning about the law, international law, and the norms and structures it puts in place, which, dictate how countries, well, should oftentimes do not, but should act,
Mm.
and how they engage in relations with each other. That was it. It was my public international law course as a first year undergraduate at LSE.
Interesting how one class really changed your perspective and wanted you to go into law school. That's really good to hear because I've seen people who do an entire undergrad in something like biology and be like, oh, the law is calling me and switch. So it's good to see that you had a class that you potentially like see what that's what you wanted to do. So following that, before law school, did you already see yourself working technology or did that interest develop later?
I've always been a little bit of, well, not a little bit, a considerable nerd. Just like I loved computers. I loved, learning how to program and things like that. I love playing with them. Um, but I actually wasn't that focused on that when I was an undergraduate, or even actually when I was in law school. I sort of got more recentered towards the corporate finance world. But I've had clients in all sorts of industry sectors. And again, just like when I started working, when I sort of looked at what made me most happy and most fulfilled, I saw that they were pretty much all in the technology sector. Um, just because, if for no other reason, it gives you an opportunity to be creative because, so much of the world, there's so many industries out there, like the finance industry, or let's say the healthcare industry, which are, very highly regulated. They've obviously been in business for, well, hundreds of years.
Mm.
Technology, not so. It's still relatively new in the way we sort of think of technology, that rules are constantly being broken and barriers constantly being erased.
Yeah, to see how technology is still evolving a lot, especially with new sort of software, seeing how you could detect your passion in that is something that's really considerable and inspiring to hear. Additionally, you stated how you were always a big tech nerd, and to see you build upon that and grow is again something that's really special to hear, as many of ours, since I'm being a young age, as many of our listeners being such a young age, to see how to build upon passions is a really important thing to hear. Reflecting on your career, was there another moment that confirmed this is the kind of lawyer I want to be?
Um, no, I was pretty much when I sort of made the pivot from sort of the corporate world to the or finance world to the
Mm.
technology world. I was pretty much immediately happy in the sense that just like I really realized this was a better career path and also had my professional interest enough that this was something that that would sustain me in the long term. Again, just I'm a very right-brained individual. I'm a terrible musician or singer or poet or what have you. But I do have a little bit of a creative edge. And again, I found that technology allowed me to pursue that edge more than other, you know, other industries.
Yeah. See, detecting, I'm sure your skills is very important, seeing if you have soft skills or hard skills, or like you said, being more tapped into the left side or right side of your brain, and seeing how you were immediately able to gauge that you were creative helped you kind of find out your career, which is again something that's incredibly important. And with that background in mind, I want to focus on what your job actually looks like today. Legal titles can sound confusing. I know that because I'm always confusing. Prosecutor, litigator, there's so many of them, and especially for students. So, for students who might be a little unfamiliar with the term, how would you describe a technology and transactions attorney in simple terms?
Good question. I mean, I would generally divide the legal profession in the United States between, let's call it litigation and transactional. Litigation obviously is court of law, litigating Supreme Court, law and order, procedurals about evidence and objection and all that kind of thing. And then, but a larger, it's generally larger sort of practice group is transactional. And that can be transactional in all sorts of different ways. For example, you could be a real estate transaction, attorney representing a seller of property or a buyer of property. You can be a corporate lawyer representing a company that's acquiring another. You can be a securities lawyer where a company decides that it's going to go public and, you do a prospectus and get listed on a stock exchange and that sort of thing. Um, I am, we call it technology transactions, but it's actually really essentially at its core, I am a commercial lawyer. The buying and selling of goods. And that is actually probably the oldest form of law that has existed. Like you as a seller, what are your obligations as a seller of a product? And you as a buyer, a purchaser of that product, what are your obligations, your rights, and what have you? That is essentially what I do and have done for my technology clients. In the sense that just like we might license some technology to use in our own products, then sell those products, whether they be to a business or a consumer or what have you. Obviously, intellectual property is an integral part of technology transactions. Um, including patents, trade secrets, copyrights, what have you, depending on sort of the technology that you're dealing with. But essentially, our job as commercial lawyers, as technology transaction attorneys, is to get a deal done with a manageable level of risk and in a fair sort of way, put the business aside. Is that a fair price? All that sort of thing. Is the company, whether you're on either side of the transaction, adequately, protected in doing that transaction? So it's unlike litigators, where obviously, well, generally, the object is to be the prevailing party. There's a winner and a loser.
Mhm.
Commercial transactions, you want both sides to be winners.
Yeah, I'm essentially hearing that transaction and transaction attorneys are more about finding like a compromise, um, differentiating from attorneys that win a case or lose a case. That's what I'm majority hearing and seeing how you discuss a variety of things like patents and more involved in the company's, I would say, like finer details is something that's good to hear since there's so many different types of attorneys, like you said, in security, etc. Yeah. So how does a typical workday look for you when you're negotiating or drafting technology and intellectual property agreements?
It obviously depends, just like you know, being inside a corporation, you have the usual amounts of sort of general meetings, staff meetings, team meetings, that sort of thing. Um, but for me, for the most part, I am engaged throughout my workday doing drafting and negotiating agreements.
Mm,
So that would be having, discussions or communications on my side as to what the goal of the transaction is, what they want, sort of where we would be happy to land on. And, if necessary, and just in often cases, being the drafter of the document, which puts that all together. And then just like depending on where you are in the stages of transaction, it would be dealing with the counterparty and essentially my equal position at the counterparty, negotiating with them to come to some type of agreement.
mm,
Um, Writing is so critically important. Um, and just like I encourage your listeners that if they do want to become a lawyer, um, to do sort of as much writing and reading as possible, because that if you want to be a transactional lawyer, you have to be able to put sort of thoughts and oftentimes complex ideas into plain written English that a court of law, a jury, a judge, arbiter, whomever would be able to understand what the intent of the parties are.
yeah, definitely. I've heard through majority lawyers of how important reading and writing is, and see how in your day-to-day life you're constantly using those skills to again draft agreements and negotiate them. Really puts an emphasis on how important reading and writing is, and that's something that I do every single day, and many students, even in college, do every single day. So it's good to see how substantial that is. So, comparing environments, how does your work differ from when you're an in-house company like Roku versus working in a law firm?
They're considerably different. And the biggest difference is, of course, when you're in-house, you have one client.
Mhm.
I serve Roku, its shareholders, its board of directors, its officers, its employees. When you are at a law firm, well, I mean, you're essentially a gun for hire. You could be representing a social media client on one call, then jump to another call and you're representing a IT equipment manufacturer or what have you. You have your client base is it tends to be very diverse. Um, with law firms, for people that are, considering legal for a career, understand that just like, at a law firm, you have to be also, besides a good lawyer, a good salesperson,
Mm.
because you need to go out and get clients and develop business and all that sort of thing. That um, for better or for worse, that role, of course, does not exist in-house. You have a client. You don't need to, just like the client. I mean, the client could fire you, I suppose. But for the most part, you don't have to go out and, do business development and that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Seeing how the law has so many different career paths based on your personality. Like, for example, how you stated in a law firm, you need to be more, I say, like outgoing and wanting to convince people to kind of hire the people in your law firm versus in in-house companies where you get hired to work for one sole purpose, which is something that is really good seeing how each one differs and is according to someone's personality or skill set. Moving on, law school teaches a lot of real world practices and often requires additional skills. So, I'd love to hear what you think on what truly matters for success. So, from your experience, which skills ended up being the most important that weren't strictly taught in law school?
Hmm. Um, I was very fortunate. I went to Cornell Law School, which is a fantastic law school, and it was in a lot of ways, very old-fashioned. It was still Socratic, for example, in the sense that just like you starting on your first day, you're being a massive room with some teacher professor at the front of it, and they know where you sit, they know where you look like, and they'll say, "Mr. Brow, what do you think about this case summary or what have you?" And of course, if you had not done the reading and preparation, you could look quite foolish, which was something that completely terrified me. Um, I learned a lot, for example, about corporate law when I was at Cornell. But what goes into the the actual practice, the day-to-day running of, let's say, a merger and acquisition
Mhm.
transaction, we weren't taught that at all. In a lot of ways, when I was a first or second year associate, I often relied upon the paralegals who had been through these kind of exercises before and knew what to do, knew what, like, for example, no one teaches you what a closing set is at law school. But that's like the most important thing on a practical nuts and bolts how to do a M&A transaction
Mhm.
entails. So it's really the practicalities, I would say, which aren't taught in law school. That having been said, I don't think that that is something I'm not sure if that's something that can actually really even be taught. It's more a tribal knowledge. It's more of an experience kind of thing. You really only learn by doing. I don't think you could put it in a textbook.
Yeah, definitely seeing how there's like a divide between things that you learn, like more like general skills, like I guess like reading, writing, discussing. Yeah, to add on, Socratic seminar is one of my favorite things. I love doing it. I love engaging with my classmates and my teacher in class. So you mentioned it, I was like, oh, that's one of my favorite things. But additionally, there's a divide on law school and those skills that you learn and the real world experience that you gain is what I'm kind of gauging and seeing of how whenever you're working, you gain more like specific skills that cater to your job other than law school, you learn more of a general consensus. Yes, but getting more specific, how important is contract drafting and negotiating for students interested in corporate or technology law?
For technology law, if you want to be a technology transactional attorney like myself, contracting ability, uh, drafting and reviewing and marking up contracts is critically important. It is the most single important thing. Um, you know, I am fortunate, and I'm sort of in some ways a little bit unusual in the sense that just like I actually quite enjoy the process of drafting a contract. Again, going back to something I said before, I like being able to take complex ideas and with my own real world experience and being able to put an agreement together, a contract together, which actually reflects that. I mean, that's really what contracts are meant to be. They are essentially taking worldly experience and putting them into words,
Mhm.
which is really no different in some ways from, a novelist, right? It's like describing their environment, describing the intentions, describing the desires. That's it.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, you explained it perfectly of how like negotiation, especially contract drafting, is like the center of technology law. And I'm sure this is like applicable for many other different types of jobs of how contract drafting, especially in in-house companies, how contract drafting is essential and to know that that's essentially what you're going to do when you're going into the real world life of a job is something very significant to hear to kind of let you see what you're essentially being able to do in the future. Yeah, but for beyond coursework, how did leadership programs like Leadership Austin, which I saw in your LinkedIn profile, and Leadership LA influence your professional growth?
I think everyone, and not obviously not just lawyers, anyone, should engage in civil engagement. And how you do that is entirely up to you, whatever causes or whatever are important to you. What I loved about the leadership programs, and they're basically affiliated in some ways, although not formally between Leadership Austin, Leadership LA, is both programs brought together around um, 40 or 50 professionals and from a variety of different industries. Like there were other lawyers, in my program, but there were also people who were social workers who worked for municipal government or state government, or who were engineers or business owners. And we would do these programs, which generally last essentially a year, and meet every month, if not more often, sort of about various topics, whether it be education, the environment, um, equal opportunity, what have you. And it was so helpful for me to have those engagements with people who, quite frankly, I probably would never have met other than through those kind of programs. They're not in my social circles, they're not in my professional circles, but I gain so much by learning from them, from seeing a different perspective. I'm a big fan of any of those sort of type of programs. And you do the same thing when you volunteer or you do community service. You're often put together with individuals who have come from a very different walk of life. And it's so invaluable. I'm uh, it's it's our duty as citizens to do that.
Exactly. And seeing how different perspectives, for me in the classroom or at my extracurriculars, seeing how different perspectives can kind of shape you as a person and alter your take on the world or different sort of experiences is something that's amazing. And that's something that we're, again, so fortunate to have. And seeing how those programs, especially for you, let you, again, in your own words, see people from a different walk of life, I'm sure altered your perspective on numerous events and numerous things in our society. Um, Building upon that, for students who are planning ahead, what classes or programs or experiences would you recommend for people interested in that type of law? Like,
I would do sort of, I mean, obviously a lot of high schools and what have you have things like moot court and that sort of debate teams. That's very useful. I never participated, but I hear a lot of alumni from Model UN
Mhm.
is very useful or very insightful. Again, oftentimes it takes you a little bit out of your bubble,
Mhm.
and gives you the opportunity to interact with people with different viewpoints and different perspectives. Um, I would just and of course sports. I'm not a very sporty person myself, but I know that sports for a lot of my colleagues was a really important element of their development as, leaders and as attorneys, te you know, teamwork, working together, working collaboratively, being in, maybe, sort of stressful environments, competition, all that sort of thing. I would just say just anything which engages you with the outside world would be a good thing.
Yeah,
Don't just stay at home
yeah.
and just be on the internet. Get out there. Get out there.
Definitely seeing how teamwork is so important, especially in the work life. And as someone who's in moot court, debate team, and Model UN, I can attest,
Okay.
yeah, I can attest to the fact that it is an incredible experience that really helps your public speaking skills and your teamwork skills. And again, I'm a very competitive person, and a lot of my friends are to seeing, and that environment helps me thrive and to see in the work life, it's the same thing is something that's really amazing to hear because my life right now and maybe my future work life could be so similar. Yeah, but it's good to hear how teamwork and collaboration really shape your life in the future. Moving on, your career includes some high stakes at work, going back to pressure, and I imagine that comes with a majority of challenges that people don't usually see. So, considering the responsibility, I'm sure you've negotiated multi-billion dollar deals. What kind of pressure comes with that, and how do you manage it?
Um, it oftentimes can be a struggle. I mean, I will not sort of pull punches on this. I mean, just like the type of transactional work that I've done historically, it can be very trying. It can be very trying on yourself. It can be very trying on your family. Um, in some cases, I've even seen it be very trying on your health. Um, you know, um, that's the way the world is these days. In the sense that just like as things seem to only just get quicker and quicker and quicker, um, you know, the demands on an attorney can be immense. I mean, I have, uh, uh, there were, when I was a corporate junior attorney in New York City, like one day, like I worked for 72 hours straight. Just I just that's it. I don't encourage that. Eh, and I wish that kind of thing weren't necessary. But that's sometimes what you kind of have to go through. Um, there's when you get older, it's easier to sort of manage it, and also to sort of schedule it to some extent. But it's, we live, by the dictates of the markets, of the world that we live in. And, we can just take a look at the world outside right now. The world is moving really, really fast. It's moving, and it seems to be getting quicker and quicker and quicker, with the decimation of information and all that sort of thing. Um, you know, I'm old enough to remember like when we used to do trade drafts with opposing counsel, we'd send them by fax
Mhm.
or personal courier, across Manhattan. You know, now it's of course, email, immediate, you know, and so it's, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing a lawyer as a profession that, like you said, takes a toll. And I've seen people in like big law and essentially now how like stressful it can be. And seeing how people are able to get out of that essentially and form a work-life balance is something that's inspiring because, again, it's always intimidating for younger students to look up at that and be like, oh, will I be able to do that? But seeing how you over time developed a work-life balance is good to hear. Because I'm sure, hopefully you don't work 72 hours straight now.
No, haven't done
Yeah.
that in many years.
Okay, good, great. So, looking at your transition, you've stated before you worked at Google and then Dell and all of that. How do you move between companies or law firms and even industries over time?
Repeat the question. How is it?
Yeah, how do you transition between different companies and yeah, essentially that.
Um, it takes time. Like so, for example, just like I've only been at Roku for a few months now. I'm still trying to sort of ascertain and get and understand the sort of culture. Every company is different, even companies within the same sector, like technology. Um, so, for example, there are some companies I've been in-house in where they love to meet. They love to have meetings. They have meetings like unless you block out your calendar, you're going to be in a meeting from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Um, there's other companies that I've worked for which prefer to do everything in writing. I've never been in house at Amazon, but for example, at Amazon, um, supposedly the story is before every meeting, a 3 or 4 page memo of the what the meeting is going to be about is distributed to the participants, and they go into that meeting and they spend the first 5 or 10 minutes reading that memo and then talk. Right. So just like that wouldn't occur at some of the companies I've worked at. Um, yeah, no, it's every company is different in the sort of nuts and bolts and the processes it likes to use. And then, of course, also every company has sort of a different identity. And that actually, if you were a lawyer looking to go in-house, it's very important, in my personal opinion, that you be aligned with the identity of that company.
Mhm.
Um, whatever, because every company has different cultural values. Um, and if you're not aligned with them or their mission, it it's not a great experience to be in. So for example, as an external lawyer, as outside counsel, I represented companies which, quite frankly, I didn't have huge amount of respect for in terms of how they did business or what their business intentions were. Um, you don't want to be in that position as in-house counsel, because your days will be miserable.
Yeah, and like you said, everything takes time. And I'm sure whenever you shifted company from company, you like you said, you saw the culture values and seeing how it's so important to align your values with the company and seeing what fits you best is really good because again, you said you don't want your work life to be miserable. You want to be in an environment which caters to your personality, your values, and everything in between. On a more personal note, how do you balance legal work with such extensive pro bono and volunteer committees?
Sometimes it can be difficult. It is admittedly more difficult in the times when I'm in private practice, because as I said before, if when you're in private practice with an outside law firm, if you're not billing hours, you should be trying to generate hours
Mm.
by doing things, you know, excuse me, business development, client relationships, that sort of thing. Um, In-house, you're given, in my personal opinion, more time to do pro bono work. And so for example, I've exceeded my goals, my personal goals for pro bono work the last 2 years,
Mm.
which I'm very happy about. And and every again, I think uh, it's it's not just like sort of a want to do. I do believe that it is a ethical obligation of every attorney to do pro bono work.
Mm.
And you might do pro bono work for companies with very different interests or ideas or whatever that you have or they have or what have you. But the w America is a very law-driven society,
Mm.
and there's a lot of people out there who need help. Of course, criminal defendants, they have right of, sort of public defenders and things like that. But I'm talking about like civil cases. So, for example, one thing that I've done a lot of in the state of Texas, actually in California as well,
Mm.
is criminal record expungements. These are people who generally committed nonviolent criminal activity, oftentimes, when they were juveniles, and are just really just trying to get their life back in order. But many corporations will not hire a
Mm.
person who has a criminal background. So they did something stupid. They're sorry about it. They want to move on. They want to, finish their high school degree or join a union or go on to college or whatever, and they've got this black mark over them. And we get rid of it.
That's so amazing to hear, seeing how community outreach is so important and being able to be involved in community and seeing I've heard a lot about how um criminals or quote unquote criminals who have it's permanent on their record and they're not able to really go out into the world and make an impact like they want to. And seeing how your organization or how you get rid of it, that's such an amazing thing to do. And essentially, I'm sure you feel like you've made an impact on your society by doing that.
I did, and I will bring up a particularly good example. One program that I was really, really happy to participate in through the LA Bar Foundation is, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of California firefighters are penitentiary inmates. Like they are incarcerated,
Oh.
and during the fire season, the summer, they go out and fight fires and they learn how to be firefighters, and they live in camps cut away for weeks on time, eating like ration food and all that sort of thing. And a lot of them get so much enjoyment out of it or so much purpose out of it. They want to be firefighters when they finish their sentences, but then they can't be firefighters because they have this criminal record on them. That was
Exactly.
like one program I participated in with Governor Gavin Newsom, which I think is just it's great for everyone. It's
Exactly.
great for the state of California. It's great for people, it's great for the firefighters. It's great for the people who like houses are on fire.
Yes.
It gets these people out of the criminal justice system and they become firefighters.
Absolutely, and seeing how firefighters are first responders, and it's essential to have them in our community. It's such a great thing to be able to aid to the program. That's so amazing to hear, and I hope one day our listeners and I am able to do something as great as that. To wrap things up, I want to focus on advice, and especially for students who are just beginning to explore the law as a possible future. So, if you were starting fresh, if you were starting law school today, what would you do differently?
I would have been a better studier of the US Constitution. I don't think when I was in high school, I gave it as much appreciation and attention as it deserves. Um, and I'm sort of handicapped as well, of course, because I went to I went to a British undergraduate university, and so I had most of my law school classmates in the United States had been through basic poli-sci, US poli-sci, or what have you. So maybe that's just my own personal sort of deficit. But just if you want to be a lawyer, I think the most important thing is that you have an appreciation that just like there are structures in place.
Mhm.
And those structures, sometimes they might be bad structures and need to be amended or replaced, but there are structures. We as a society have to live under certain rules and regulation, and you do so and here I'm sort of channeling my parents as anthropologists as a familial you know, village, whatever level, that's the way that only humanity can continue to exist. And for obviously a nation state, the constitutional structure is the most important. And just understand that just like again, you might not like everything about it and you might want to change it, which you absolutely should try to do. But we have to live by rules.
Exactly. I know it's so important to have like a day-to-day structure. And like you said, you have a weekend structure and seeing how it's so important to kind of have boundaries for yourself and kind of have rules, like you said, set in place so you can essentially get everything done. Because I know a lawyer is a demanding job, which requires you to constantly be moving around emails and tasks and to see having rules for yourself and having boundaries that help you get things done is very important and significant towards your career, like you stated. When it comes to guidance, what role has mentorship, seeing how you went from London to the United States, what role has mentorship played in your career, and how can students find strong mentors?
For the most part, mentors find you, I would say, in the sense that I have been very fortunate in my career that sort of th- through demonstration of my work product and my diligence, um, sort of at least in the law firm model, for example, um, sort of partners find you.
Mm.
So, for example, when I began my career as a corporate lawyer in New York, a particular senior partner after like one or two deals naturally kind of latched on to me and to the extent that actually when he went to another law firm he took me with him, you know. Um, so yeah, I think it happens organically. I wouldn't be out searching for it. I wouldn't like I'm not the type of person. that would, for example, like take a look at a corporate hierarchy and say, "Oh, I'm going to become her or his favorite or their favorite, what have you." Um, I mean, I suppose some people do, but a good working relationship, because it's bilateral and mutual, or as it should be, like a marriage, you naturally find each other. That's my own personal opinion.
Yeah, this is a different take than what I've heard, seeing how hard work, I'm sure hard work can get you to be the mentee of people that want to like mentor you and stuff like that. And seeing how I know in your workplace you should wait till someone finds you until you find someone else. Um to add on to that, how did you kind of make that bond with your mentor? How did they essentially reach out to you?
Um, it's mutual respect, I would say. I look back at my mentors, and they had, they were obviously, much more knowledgeable, had much more experience about the law, but maybe, they sort of saw like sort of a glimmer of themselves,
Mhm.
like in me, as a junior attorney or something, and found that. And I also look now because I'm more at this, I'm pretty old, so I'm more the mentor than the mentee,
Yeah.
sort of position. And I found that at every sort of organization I've worked for, it's not been the person who sort of sought me out necessarily for kind of sponsorship or what have you. It's been the people that, like, on a day-to-day basis I'd work with, and I would be really impressed, with their work product and, their responsiveness and their courtesy and all that sort of thing. And then just naturally we would we would click. And I would um, you know, unfortunately, organizations are not the most efficient at all times. And I'm sure that there are people out there who would say, no, you need to go out and seek like a mentor, find some person in the organizational chain, and latch on to that person and honestly, be like their yes person. That's not my style. Haven't done it, won't ever do it, but there you go.
Yeah, definitely. And what I'm hearing is that hard work will get you the people that you need and the people that will essentially better your work life. And that's something that I find really inspiring, seeing how hard work shapes us throughout our entire life. And I agree with your perspective on how if you're doing the right thing and if you're putting your best effort into whatever you're doing, people will come to you. Yeah, definitely. So, thinking strategically, how can students position themselves for jobs, especially in tech, seeing how these roles are so competitive now?
I would just say have a good depth of knowledge, and not just like depth of knowledge of like technology, but that's certainly important. I have suffered, I myself, have been impaired because I don't really have a scientific background.
Mhm.
I was terrible at math, I was terrible at physics and things like that. That having been said, it shouldn't keep you from, the type of profession which I have adopted. But if you have those abilities, definitely exploit them. Um, I would also say just we talked about reading and writing, of course. Financial literacy actually would be one thing. It may surprise you, or maybe not, but finance and accounting is very important, obviously, in the professional world. And you learn a lot about a company by understanding just like, okay, what makes money, what loses money, what is profitable, what is not, just like how a financial statement looks, how a balance sheet works. Because, at the C-suite level, for the most part, that's what they're being driven by. Um, you know, um, let's say, look, use an example, Google, obviously, founded by engineers and things like that, but their business model is based upon, ad revenue. And unless you understand that, you won't understand how Google itself operates or what they want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad to hear that financial literacy is something that can aid to students who are having difficulty in finding their jobs is another level of information that they can acquire. And like you said, it's always good to have a basic understanding of what a company's finances look at. And I loved how you used an example of Google seeing how it hires multiple employees every year. So hopefully that'll be help to a couple of our listeners. So, to close us out, this is one of my favorite questions that I ask everyone in general. So, if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Um, Focus. I would say focus. Concentrate on the big picture. Step aside from the minute to minute or the day to day or even the year to year and take a look holistically at where you want to be when you're 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 or what have you, and keep that in mind because we all and everyone, it affects everyone. We all get sort of impacted by short-termism
Mm.
and, the latest thing that pops up on our phone or what have you. So yes, focus and look holistically.
Yeah, I think that's such a considerable thing to say because I can speak for myself. I get easily distracted by things that are constantly happening in my life. And to see as someone who agrees and seeing how looking at the big picture and seeing how this test won't impact me or this grade won't impact me in the future to essentially grow beyond that is something that's really special to hear. And I'm sure um, you're now helping many younger students hear the advice that essentially you would love to hear when you were younger. But this brings me so much sadness to close out our episode. But Geoffrey, thank you so, so much for joining Lawfully Told. Your experiences and advice and essentially your journey shows how so many different paths a legal career can take you. And thank you to everyone listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow Lawfully Told for more conversations about the law and people behind it. Until next time, this is Lawfully Told. Thank you.